What are the most common financial mistakes made during a divorce? I'm Tulsa attorney James Wirth. That's the question that we have here. It took a few minutes to think about that, and I've got some things to consider as far as the financial mistakes that we've seen people make in their cases and try to avoid them. So first off, number one financial mistake, hiding assets. There's certain discovery that you're allowed to do in divorce processes, just like typical civil litigation. You send out discovery requests, you can send out subpoenas. So you can do requests for production, interrogatories, requests for admissions, where you're getting the information from the other side under oath, where you're requesting bank account statements, where you're asking them questions under oath written, or you could do depositions and do it that way. So you can get locked into your answers. And if you don't provide truthful information, they can subpoena the bank institutes, they can subpoena your employer, whatever third parties they need to get that information independent. If they find out that you're lying and trying to hide assets, then that also is going to look bad to you, to the judge, make it less likely you're going to have any credibility for other determinations before that judge. And also, if you're responding to those in discovery requests, that's going to be under oath. That could be potentially perjury, which has up to a 5-year sentence and is a felony if convicted in the state of Oklahoma. So that's the first one, is hiding assets is problematic. Number two, spending separate property. Okay, so when you are getting ready to start a divorce process, you want to think strategically about the money that you spend and that you don't spend. Certain assets are going to be considered to be marital assets. Certain assets are going to be separate assets that you've kept separate and you had prior to the marriage. So if you're looking at where do I come up with funds to pay an attorney to get this started, or during the process, you're going to want to think about what funds you want to use. So you're not going to want to use your separate funds. You're going to want to use marital funds from maybe a joint bank account, something like that, when you pay your retainer. So you want to think strategically about that. So using separate property where it would be proper to use marital property, it is not always proper to do so. Once a divorce is filed and the summons is served, automatic temporary injunction goes into place. Everything needs to be done pursuant to the normal course of business. So you do want to consult with a lawyer in determining what you can and cannot do. But I've seen a lot of cases where there was protected money that was used when it could have been money that would have been split as marital funds. So you want to consider those things. Next one is commingling assets. Just like we talked about in number two. For number three here in commingling assets, we want to look at what is separate property, what is marital property. Assets that are separate property, you want to keep them separate property, and that means you want to avoid commingling them before the divorce petition is filed, but also while the divorce is pending. So if you've got property that you own prior to the marriage, do not commingle it. Do not put marital funds in there. Do not put your spouse's name on it. Do not mix it with anything that is marital. You want to be careful about that. So that's a big financial mistake we see, is commingling assets. Last one we see is making big purchases. So if you have a divorce case pending, you are still married. So new property that you're acquiring is technically marital property. It's going to be subject to division when the divorce case is done. So you generally don't want to make big purchases like, buy a new boat, buy real estate, buy a car, because that's going to be marital property that technically could be awarded by the court to your spouse, even though you bought it while the divorce was still pending. It would be highly unlikely for the court to do that, but why complicate things? Also, if you're getting loans during that time period, you're still married, that's not going to be great for having documents signed off on and worrying about liens and having co-buyers on that. You want to avoid all of that. If you can put off any of those big expenses until the divorce decree is done, do that. So as far as the financial mistakes we see during a marriage, the ones you want to avoid, hiding assets, spending separate property when you could spend marital property where it would be allowable to do so, commingling assets that causes separate property to become marital property, and making purchases while the divorce is still pending. Those are the ones you want to try to avoid. But there could be other specific ones in your circumstances. You want to talk to an attorney about that privately and confidentially to get legal advice. If you want to schedule that with somebody at my office, you can go online to makelawEasy.com.